solutions in. Oh, thank you. Simply because there's no solutions engineering major like there is an electrical engineering major or computer engineering major. So it doesn't really come up, on LinkedIn if you're searching for electrical engineer, computer engineer jobs. So the simplest way to explain what a solutions engineer does and what it is by comparing it to, more conventional, or I'm calling it product engineering. As a product engineer, you're solving problems for your users, right? And take Netflix or the iPhone, right? These are solutions to problems faced by millions of people. The iPhone got rid of the GPS and the notepad and your, BlackBerry and all these different things. So that was the solution it was solving. And while the iPhone is a great product, it's not the perfect product, for any particular person. For example, you might prefer an iPhone with less storage and more battery life. And you might prefer an iPhone with a better camera and trade that off for, slightly less performance. And that would be the ideal product for you. But the engineers that create these products make them to where they are, appealing to a huge audience. So one product, massive audience. Now, contrast that to solutions engineering, which is making a specific product using the product from the engineers. And this is a solution for a specific problem for a specific customer. So, for example, you can think of, GPT-5, right? Pretty new. Everyone's probably familiar with ChatGPT at this point. The product engineers at OpenAI work on creating the state-of-the-art, most intelligent, most flexible LLM out there. And the solutions engineers take that LLM and they fine-tune it, they build it into a RAG pipeline, use it for vector search, and they build solutions off of that. So, what exactly would a solution like that look like? Well, for example, if you take, let's say, JP Morgan or ExxonMobil, and they have a problem where they have so much information, so much documentation about their pipelines, or in the case of, JP Morgan, maybe their financial statements and their investments, and they want to make all that data available through an LLM. So you can just ask, tell me about all the companies I invested in as JP Morgan in the past year. And you can feed that to an LLM. Using GPT-5, the solutions engineers have created a product that allows JP Morgan to do that search. So really, the way I want you to think of it is product engineers create a product that appeals to a mass audience, and solutions engineers use that product to solve problems for specific customers. Fair enough. So as a solutions engineer, there's tons of ways that this sort of philosophy applies. And there are tons of companies that hire solutions engineers to do this. And one thing you'll notice with all of these is that, some of them have consumer-facing products like, Dell makes, of course, computers. Intel makes CPUs that consumers like us use. But all of these have very, very significant business customers. Take, let's say, Salesforce, for example. I bet no one here has really used Salesforce just in their free time. But they have a huge customer base of other businesses. And that's where the solutions engineers come in. You're going to see solutions engineers working exclusively with other businesses to put them on your product. So, for example, a solutions engineer at Salesforce, right? Their customer might be anyone from, Best Buy to Amazon to Google or to, you name it. Pretty much everyone uses Salesforce. And the solutions engineers are there to help those customers use Salesforce to solve their problems optimally. Same thing if you take, any of these companies, right? Take AWS, for example. We're probably familiar with them, big cloud provider. Any consumer can go on there, create an account, launch infrastructure, right? So what exactly are the solutions engineers there for? Well, let's say I'm, a big financial institution, a big bank. We'll call it, Goldman Sachs, for example. If I want to get off of my on-premises data center and I want to move everything to the cloud and put it on AWS, how in the world do I do that? There's a huge mess you would have to untangle. I don't even know, as if I'm from Goldman Sachs, I don't even know how to use AWS. I don't know how to use it optimally. I don't know how to manage the costs. I don't know how to, get the best performance. I don't know how to do any of that. So that's where the AWS solutions engineer would come in and help me do all of that. They're the product experts that help me as a financial institution solve my problems. So to understand really how the solutions engineers work and where their responsibilities are, it's important to understand what I'm calling the product sale timeline. So with any product you use as a business, you're sort of going through this same cycle. So let's say, take financial institution again. I want to get onto AWS or just any cloud provider. I'm going to first be interested in different cloud platforms. I'll be looking at GCP, I'll be looking at Azure, I'll be looking at AWS, Oracle, etc. And I'll reach out to different people, different account managers that work at Azure or AWS or Oracle. And I'll tell them that, hey, I'm looking to do this project. I'm evaluating my different options. Tell me what's out there. And this is where the pre-sales solutions engineer comes in. The pre-sales solutions engineer is focused on showing that the product you're working with is going to solve the problem optimally. So they're working with the customer before the sale has gone through, and they're showing the customer, they're trying to display to them that our product is the best fit for your problem. We'll take the classic example of, migration to the cloud. They would be showing them exactly, you have your huge machine learning clusters that need to be put onto Azure or AWS. This is why Azure is the best solution. This is why GCP is the best solution. And here I have this machine learning cluster very similar to yours, and it's hitting these high performance benchmarks. It's running all the throughput that you need, et cetera. So once the customer has agreed to move forward with a particular product, that's where the post-sales solutions engineer comes in. Now, the post-sales solutions engineers, they come in and make it happen. They come in and they actually, push the customer and develop the software needed and, do these projects specifically for this customer to get them on that product. So, let's take one of the other examples I was showing is Scale AI. Well, let's take Scale. So if a customer is evaluating Scale for their data classification, the pre-sales solutions engineer would help them show them that Scale beats out all the other competitors, help show them that Scale is going to have the throughput and the quality of data validation that they need. And then the post-sales solutions engineer comes in and actually, builds the APIs, builds the software on top of Scale for that specific customer. So let's say, we'll take the example of, Chevron, for example. The post-sales solutions engineer might come in, work with Chevron, help put them on Scale by creating a big data pipeline that pushes all of their data gathered from all their pipelines and refineries, pushes that through Scale, and then stores that in some sort of database. So both of these roles are highly, highly needed, and both have their own specific place in the marketplace. And these roles of solutions engineers goes by tons of different titles. So it might be a solutions architect, like, that's what my role is. might be a systems engineer or a professional services engineer, or one that we're really seeing come on the scene is a forward deployed engineer, something that's was really spearheaded by Palantir and is really picking up steam across all of tech currently. But you can really just think of these as two separate categories, right? The first, pre-sales engineer, as I mentioned earlier, and the post-sales solutions engineer. So if you see roles that are, solutions architect, pre-sales engineer, sales engineer, that all fits into the pre-sales solutions engineer category. Whereas if you see forward deployed engineer, deployment engineer, field applications engineer, that'll be post-sales. You'll actually be, writing the code to implement these systems that you're working with. So as you're going through, career interviews and applications, keep this in mind because this will help you, differentiate and gear your resume one way or the other. So a little bit more about the pre-sales solutions engineer. Like I mentioned, they are focused on showing that the product solves the problem. That is their one focus. Their main goal is do whatever it takes to show that this is the best product to solve the problem. So for example, whenever I was at Dell, I was a pre-sales solutions engineer. And I was working with this really big hospital chain in Houston that had, multiple locations everywhere. And they were refreshing their entire data center stack. So they're buying all this new servers, storage, networking hardware from Dell. And they needed to know, before they moved forward with the sale, they needed to know that if a hospital's data center were to, just crash or lose power or something were to happen and this would go offline, that all of their data would still be accessible from other locations. So that was a really, specific, unique problem that we needed to show to this customer that, Dell's products could do and could do very well. So my job as the pre-sales SE, I'm just going to use SE from here on out, as the pre-sales SE was showing that our products could do this data replication in real time with zero data loss. So what I did is I used multiple of Dell's data centers, created a simulated hospital environment, enabled that active data replication between these data center locations, and then shut one down on a live call with the customer to show that, look at all this data that was moving through, zero data loss, zero interference with the data. And this, is exactly what you were looking for. So that was, one example of exactly what a pre-sales SE is going to be doing. And with the post-sales solutions engineer, this is focused on, actually building out this solution in the customer's environment, in the customer's company, and making sure everything works perfectly. So whenever I was at AWS, I was a post-sales solutions engineer. So what I was doing specifically on this one project, I was on it for about a year and a half, and I was working for this really large oil and gas company, and they needed to build this data pipeline that pulled data from refineries and from their contracts with pipeline companies and from their invoices to those pipeline companies, and push that all through this data pipeline and feed it into a vector database. And the reason for that was because we wanted to have an LLM that they could talk to, and they could just ask like, hey, how much did we spend with this pipeline company in 2023? They could ask it, based on what we agreed on the contracts, are we overpaying or underpaying this specific pipeline company? So that was the project that we were building on top of AWS. And it was my job as a post-sales solutions engineer to actually code it out, build it, test it, build the CI/CD pipeline, put it in production, along with an entire team. So the post-sales SEs are the ones that are hands-on, writing code in production for the customer. Now, any questions about, solutions engineering or pre-sales or post-sales SEs currently? Yes. Yeah, great question. So where do you draw the line between a broad problem and a specific problem? And there's no clear answer that applies to every scenario, but I'll give you this sort of rule of thumb. In that example of the data centers and the data replication with Dell, the broad problem is how do we get two of Dell's data centers to actively replicate data in real time. That's the problem that the product engineers are focusing on. So they're writing the code, they're building out the network protocols to do that across locations. As a solutions engineer, I'm not making the products do that. I'm not writing the code to do that. But the problem I'm solving is ensuring that the hospital customer can do that. So when I say specific problem, I mean a problem that a customer is facing. So does that answer your question? Okay, of course. That was a great question. And as I go throughout this, feel free to raise your hand at any time, and we can keep this really interactive. Yes. That's a great question. So that would really be neither role. So the responsibility of finding new clients, new customers, comes down to the sales team. So that'll be account executives, account managers, business development reps. That's their job. You don't get a tap on the shoulder until you get to this point where the customer is genuinely focused on moving forward and they want to see the products. So you're never going to have to worry about customers that aren't really interested. Exactly. All right. Cool. So I feel like now, maybe we have a better understanding of what a solutions engineer is, but what is a solutions engineer not? There are a lot of misconceptions out there about what solutions engineering is and what it's not, and I want to help clarify that. So solutions engineering is not sales. Like we were just saying, sales is focused on finding new customers, negotiating pricing, gauging customer interest, doing competitive marketing, things like that. That's not going to be anything that you're doing. You are focused on the product itself and showing off its capabilities and showing that these features and the capabilities of the product can solve the problems of the specific customer that you are talking to. And, I say customer and customers, but as a solutions engineer, you might be working with one customer at a time. If they're a really large customer like AT&T, or you might be working with dozens of customers at the same time. It just sort of depends on the size of the projects you're working on and sort of the size of the interest of the deal. So yeah, solutions engineering, not exactly sales. You work with a lot of sales counterparts and you have the same common goal of ensuring that the customer you're working with, in the end purchases the product and has a great experience. But the way you do that is completely separate. Solutions engineering is not support either. Support is responsible whenever there is an issue with the product that needs to be solved, or if there's a specific in-depth, question that needs to be routed either to the engineering team who built the product, or to the support specialists who focus on this kind of thing. Now, the solutions engineers are focused on not problems with, the product you might be working with or any bugs, but they're focused on the problem that the customer is facing. Like, in the hospital case, replicating data across locations. Or in the case of, a Scale AI customer, of data classification and data validation, data cleaning. So very different focuses across these. But I've had people that, when I'm talking to them, it comes across like it might be a support role simply because I'm solving problems with the customer. Very different, however. Third, I guess this doesn't really apply here because everyone's already very computer focused, but it's really not only for computer engineering, computer science majors. As an SE, you're going to be a product expert. And of course, if you're joining, Salesforce or VMware, you're not going to be an expert in those. And every company knows that. So they are not expecting you to come in with this in-depth knowledge of their product or even in-depth knowledge of, how to like build their product or the product features. So a lot of these companies are, very flexible with what they're looking for. But, as you're already all, very computer focused, you have a pretty solid leg up whenever you're applying to these companies. Yes.
So, thanks for bringing this up about it not being sales and support. And I know you brought up the product sale timeline before, right? And like the life cycle for like the product. So, how important is communication throughout the chain? Like, do you talk more to like certain people along the product timeline, or is there communication throughout?
That's a great question. So, throughout that product timeline, Dr. Peoples was asking, what is the communication like throughout that entire process? And I'll go back to that slide just so we have the visual. But really, of course, you're going to start communicating with the customer right here once your sales team has engaged you and they say, hey, this is going to be a big deal. We need an expert. We need to show them that these features and capabilities are exactly what they're looking for. So at this point, you're going to be doing a lot of communication with the customer and with your sales team. You'll be sort of like all in a big, group working together. And whenever you're working with your customer and communicating with them, you're going to be doing a lot of demos, going to be doing a lot of really in-depth technical discussions. You're going to be working with your customer's engineers, your customer's VPs, pretty much everyone in between there. And on your own side, on your own sales counterparts, you're going to be talking to the account managers. How do we make sure that we can fit the right price range that this customer is looking for? Do we need to disable some features or capabilities in the software to hit that price range, et cetera? So, lots of communication throughout the entire process. All right, so, as an SE, you're going to be facing a lot of challenges. And I want to make sure I can paint this picture accurately so you know what you're getting into. And, in an interview, it also helps to ask, very targeted questions about these topics and these challenges. It shows that you really know, what the role entails. So the first one is explaining to your parents what you do. I don't think anyone could really figure this out. I think my mom is like, you're like a chip designer, right? So there's really just no way to explain to your parents what an SE actually does. Second is, as a post-sales SE, you're coming in and joining the project after the sale. So the customer already has all of these expectations about how this project's going to go, what it's going to look like when it's done, what are the timelines. But really, there's still a lot up in the air. As a post-sales SE, you're the one doing that integration, that implementation, writing the code to sort of glue the customer with the product. And depending on the customer's environment, this may be a huge pain in the neck. There may be a lot of sort of skeletons in the closet that you uncover, and timelines might have to be pushed back. And, it's your responsibility to communicate, any delays or any difficulties with the customer. And that can be pretty difficult because, as the customer, well, I was just told from the sales side that, this is going to be pretty simple integration and, I'll have it up and running within 8 to 12 weeks. And as a post-sales engineer, you might have to come in and say, well, we would do that if you weren't using, SQL Server from 2004. There could be a lot of sort of difficulties that you uncover along the way. So third is, customers might not always be aware of what exactly is going on, especially in a really big company. There's going to be multiple software engineering teams. There's going to be multiple architecture teams, multiple leadership teams. And if you're doing a project that encompasses all of those, it's going to be very difficult to try and get the right information from the right people. And sort of that's where your puzzle fitting, that's where you come in and sort of put the puzzle pieces together and, work with your engineering creativity and, get everything compiled, all the information you might need. Fourth is that products are constantly evolving. In the past 3 years, I think every product ever now has AI integrated in some way. And that's up to you as a solutions engineer to be fully in depth about how new features, new integrations work. You also need to be fully aware of the timelines and how these new features affect your customers. So there's a lot to keep up with as an SE. And I'm not saying this to discourage you at all. This is a great career path, but I just want to make sure sort of the challenges. So, number one, what you're getting into. And number two, you can also talk about this in your interview. You can focus on how you've dealt with these challenges previously. For example, you might not have worked with an official, business before and deployed a system into their environment and dealt with a customer or business who doesn't know what they want. But you might have developed a project for school where you have real users who are students and, gathering information about what students actually want and what features they might want enabled. That could be applied here very well. So keep this in mind as you go throughout your interview process, because this could be pretty helpful. So what really sets successful SEs apart? I've worked with tons of SEs across different roles in different companies, different products. And there's a couple different things that I've really noticed on the SEs that really succeed. And the first is empathy. To put it short, empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And you might ask, well, why is that important? Why do I have to do that as an engineer? Well, you are going to be solving the problems of other people. And if you are not able to really relate to why these problems are keeping your customer up at night, why these problems are important, it might be a little difficult for you to really see, the forest for the trees. You need to be able to understand why their problems are important so you can really relate to them and they can trust you whenever you are talking about your product. If a customer doesn't trust you, it's going to be hard for them to believe what you're saying about the product. So building that trust, building that empathy is really important. And, you might hear empathy and think that this is a trait like eye color or hair color. But it's really not. Empathy is a skill, just like anything else. You can learn this just with practice and dedicated focus on trying to become more empathetic to your customers. So if you wouldn't really describe yourself as an empathetic person, don't let that deter you from the SE role. Second is project management. Especially as a post-sales SE, you're going to be working on a team. And, as Aggie engineers, we're going to rise to the top. And we're going to be likely the ones helping to push the project forward, lead the team, and really drive the deadlines, drive the project forward. And this means you're going to be responsible for other people's work. You are going to have your neck on the line when there's a delay, or when some product implementation is having a lot of bugs, or something just isn't working right. That's going to be you. So how do you take ownership in those scenarios? How do you not just say, oh well, it's not my fault. Don't look at me. I'll put this on someone else. This is a really important part of the role, and really helps the people who do well, really helps them stand out. Again, skill, like anything else. There's no class for project management, at least there wasn't when I was here. So this is something you learn on the job. Third is the ability to discuss projects and products at varying levels of depth. So like I mentioned earlier, you're going to be working with people all the way up from VPs and executives to engineers at your customer's company. And you need to be able to talk to them at a appropriate level of depth to where they really relate, they understand, they can see why this is important. So for example, if you're talking to a CFO or some executive, they're probably going to be very focused on on the revenue impact this is going to have, how it's going to increase agility and increase flexibility, and all the buzzwords that executives like to use. So, but when you're working with an engineer, you're also going to need to know what's the performance that we can get out of the software. What happens whenever the software fails? What do we do if we want to build on top of these APIs? That's where you'll also need that super deep technical depth to where you can talk to anyone about your specific product. So as a solutions engineer, well, before I go any further, actually, any questions about what we've been discussing so far? Yes. So how in-depth is the code that we write as solutions engineers on the post-sale side? Yeah, great question. So very in-depth. You need to know essentially every API, why you might use one configuration over another of your API. So for example, if you're a forward deployed engineer at OpenAI, you're going to need to know all your different models, which is beyond just GPT-5 and 4.0 and all that. They have tons of models available to the API. You need to know all the different models. You need to know how you can fine-tune the models. You need to know how to do prompt engineering and system prompts. So you're going to need to know the product at a very in-depth level. Yep. Awesome. Mm-hmm. All right. So because of these unique skills and this unique work that you get to do as an SE, you're going to develop a lot of skill sets that are valuable throughout your career. If you want to continue the SE path, you can become a senior SE, a principal SE, and maybe even a distinguished SE as time goes on. You could also go up the management path and become a manager, a director, a VP, and sort of go up the managerial path for SEs. And this is going to be really helpful because your project management skills are going to come into play here. As you become a senior or principal SE, it's less about writing the actual code, building in the APIs. It's a lot more about high-level performance, what's going to drive the impact of this implementation. And of course, being a manager, you need to have all of that information plus project management and leadership. So the skills you gain as a solutions engineer really help set you up for that path. Also, if you become a solutions engineer and you're interested in trying out other paths, you could also go down the project management role. Because as a product manager, you're going to be working specifically with other customers, trying to figure out what is really needed by this product and how can we implement it? What are the timelines? If we need to, if I'm a product manager for AWS and I'm using SageMaker, their AI platform, I need to figure out, what kind of models need to be available through here. How are customers actually deploying their ML models onto SageMaker? How can we make that optimized for our users? What is Azure doing? What is GCP doing? And the skill sets you learn as a solutions engineer, specifically around that customer engagement, that sussing out of what's important to this customer, that's really going to set you up for this. You can also go into the more technical route. Especially if you are on the post-sale side, you're going to be doing a lot of writing code, a lot of CI/CD, a lot of customization, a lot of extensions on existing software. And that's really going to help build your skills if you want to become a software engineer or a DevOps engineer. It's really going to set you up for that path as well. Also, if you want to go more into the other direction, go more into the sales side. If you start off as an SE and you really like that engagement with customers, and you want to be going more into maybe the hunting down of customers and the timelines and the pricing and the budgeting and finding those customers and making it work, you could always pivot into the account executive or TAM, technical account manager role. Both are, very appealing to SEs because you already have such a skill set with customers. And third, or last, what's really common as an SE, and I don't want to make this sound more common than it is, but a lot of SEs will go off and start their own companies. They start these partnership companies where they essentially will find customers or work with existing customers and do all of the SE work themselves. So if you're more of an entrepreneurial type, you want to try starting your own company and pushing that forward, this is really great option for you. If you look at back to AWS, we'll look at the partner ecosystem. It's posted online. If you look up like AWS partnerships, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller companies where all they do is help AWS customers, optimize AWS and migrate to AWS. And that solutions engineering skill set is like the perfect skill set you want to have for this. So lots of opportunities there if you are more the entrepreneurial type. 10 minutes? Okay. I'll go through these last few points a bit quicker. So when you're preparing for an SE career, there's a couple things you want to do in your interviews and in your resume. And the first one is driving the why. So has anyone ever used an Apple Vision Pro? Yes. So they're like insane, right? Like the engineering behind it is pretty incredible. But it doesn't really solve a problem. And that's why, it's not doing so hot. No disrespect to Apple. But as an SE, you want to drive the why of your projects. Whenever you have your projects on your resume, you need to be able to specify like why this is important. What problem was it solving? Why was it needed? As an engineer, of any kind, that's going to be important, but especially for being an SE. Second, you're going to be solving tons of ambiguous problems as an engineer. You're going to be diving into different customers, different companies. They have different tech stacks, different skill sets, different people, and you're going to have to start from scratch with pretty much every project. So that ability to dive into ambiguous problems where you don't really have any information is really, really valuable. If you were able to, show that in an SE interview, you're going to be miles ahead of the rest. This is really the home hitter. If you are able to show that you solved a real world problem using the company's existing technology, that is such a huge leg up. If you're interviewing for an SE role for like Anthropic or something, and you were able to show that you built this platform on top of Claude and you did fine tuning and RAG and all this interesting stuff, then that's really going to help you in an interview. And a lot of these companies have new grad SE programs that are specifically geared towards students like you. So all of these companies, I researched and verified, they all have programs where they have like associate solutions engineer or associate solutions architect. I believe Google Cloud calls it associate customer engineer, where they are looking for students directly out of college who don't have any working experience besides maybe a couple internships, who they want to bring through these programs and develop them into SEs for their company. So definitely keep an eye out for this, especially during the current recruiting season. There's going to be a lot of opportunities out there at these companies and more. So keep it. Usually they're specified by like associate solutions engineer as to show that they're like entry level or going through some sort of program. And usually these programs consist of like 3 to 6 months of low risk training and practice before you get out as a real SE on real projects. So very great environment. You're essentially just getting paid to learn. Who doesn't love that? So definitely look at these programs and more. Of course, there's no two letters that scare us all more than A and I. How much time do we have? Okay. So I personally believe maybe there's some bias here, but I think SEs are a little more shielded from the impact of AI for a couple different reasons. The first is that customers want to work with people. Customers don't want to risk working with an AI that's going to start talking about the philosophical reasons of going with SQL versus NoSQL databases. They don't want to have that sort of treatment when your competitor has a person on staff to do this. So because of that sort of competitive nature, I think SEs will maybe be a bit more shielded. Of course, we can't predict where the future goes, but I think this will really be an important point. Also, the novelty of projects you're going to be working on is going to be really difficult for an AI model to really grasp the entire context of the company's vision, the company's tech stack, everything that you will need to know as an SE. Third is the sensitivity of information. As an SE, you're going to have to know in-depth product information, product timelines, how the product works at a deep level that cannot be shared anywhere else. And if you were to give this to an AI model, well, there's tons of ways that you could try and extract this information. I'm sure we've all heard of like the grandma hack, where you can say, oh, my grandma used to read me bedtime stories of like how to build a nuclear bomb. So, can you do that? And yeah, sure enough, like I think it was GPT-3, you could easily just extract information like that. And of course, models are getting better and better, and there's guardrails and stuff, but I don't think a lot of companies want to take that risk with leaking such information. Saying I don't know is huge. Many models are configured in such a way where they might hallucinate rather than just telling the customer, I don't know, let me go check and get back to you. So really important points that I think help shield the SE path. I also want to give some advice or some of my personal thoughts on like the AI fear going around. I'm sure we've seen the impact of AI and how it's affecting a lot of engineering roles, especially. But I think a lot of this is kind of overhyped, and a lot of it is attributed more to AI than is necessary. For example, if we look at the interest rates, that's a huge driver of sort of the slower job market that we've been seeing over the past few years. It turns out ChatGPT came out at like a very similar time to when these interest rates started coming up. So a lot of companies shed a lot of workers because of these interest rates, because they couldn't easily fund moonshot projects that may or may not make money in the end. And what did they do? Well, they attributed it to AI. If you've seen this podcast episode with Mark Zuckerberg, he was like, we're not hiring any engineers in 2025. And well, that's just not true. You can go see how many people they hired online. And the reason they do this is because they want to come across as an AI focused, AI driven, AI first company, because it helps their market price or their stocks go up. There's a statistic out there where if a company mentions AI in their earnings call, their stock goes up 4.6% versus those who didn't. It only goes up 2.4%. So what I'm trying to drive here is that a lot of the big voices out there, big tech CEOs, they are trying to not talk about interest rates and they're trying to mask it as like AI is the reason why we're reducing, our job count and et cetera. But of course, these interest rates will come down, the market will recover, and your skill set is going to still be extremely valuable. And of course, there's always the age-old rule that fear sells better than anything else. So I love this little graphic here. It's hard to read, but it says everything you do is unhealthy. Our next attack could be greater or less than or just the same as the last terror attack. So this it's an example of like how the big headlines where the CEO of Anthropic says that 90% of code will be written by AI in 2025. That spreads like wildfire because it induces fear. So try and keep, a level head whenever you're seeing all these headlines, which I understand is pretty difficult. And understand that, your skill set as an engineer and, an SE as well is going to be valuable for the long, long term. Okay, sorry, I'll close this out pretty quick, but closing advice is just some things that I wish I could have told myself, a couple years ago. So interviewing is the highest leverage skill that you have. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, if you have, 30, 40 hours to focus on any one skill to like improve your life in the long term, I believe interviewing is that, especially for where you all are as students. Being able to excel in your interviews and just like really crush your resume and, connect and being able to talk about your experience really well is going to pay off in the long term. So definitely focus on that. Do mock interviews, team up, have some professors examine your resume. Very important. Second, always look out for your dream job. If you get your first job out of college, don't feel like you're married to it. It's perfectly okay to hop jobs. If you really wanted that job at Anthropic or Google, but didn't quite get it, keep applying. Don't wait 2 years for, my resume has to look like I didn't hop jobs or whatever. I hear a lot of people say that, when they first start out and then they like regret it later. So definitely never give up, like always keep applying if, for your dream jobs. It's really a numbers game. And that's the third point is that like, even with some, big name companies on my resume like Dell and AWS, I only had a response rate of less than like 5%. You just have to like put out tons of applications and just hope you hear back. There's so much like randomness and unpredictability in job applications and interviews. Maybe you just got a bad interview, or maybe his cat was sick that morning. So definitely just keep a level head and make sure that it's really just a numbers game when you're applications are going out. And fourth, use your Aggie network. I'm always willing to help people out, especially Aggies. So my LinkedIn is online. Feel free to just direct message me if you want to have a further call, or you want some advice or anything. I'm absolutely willing to help. And there's a lot of other people out there who are too. So just cold DM people at your target companies who are Aggies, and you'll probably get a lot of responses back, more than you might expect. And Dr. Peoples and Dr. Kazanovich are running a new alumni connection team. So they'll be able to help maybe guide you or maybe connect you to some people who you might get some value from. So yeah, that's everything from me. I think I'm a bit over time here, but if you have any last questions, I'm here. So any questions currently? Yes.
What is good for a new graduate to start with the product as a product engineer or how do you?
Yeah. So essentially, how do you? What are the things to watch out for if you're transitioning from SE to product engineer? Well, I think the biggest thing, it's not so much the name, but the skill set that you have. As an SE, especially if you're on the post-sales side, you're going to be gaining a lot of the skill sets that you would use as a software engineer. Doing tons of writing code, building pipelines, testing, etc. But if you're on the pre-sales side, you probably won't be doing much of that. So if you're an SE and you want to eventually transition to a product engineer, try and get in a position as an SE where you can build those skills. So where you can demonstrate, to your software engineering interviewer that, hey, I already have these skills. I've written, this many lines of code. I've built these systems. I've, tested it. I built these pipelines, etc. So I know a lot of people who have done that transition. And it's the same kind of thing. It's really just comes down to the skill set that you have.
Mr. McCullough, thoughts there?
Thank you.
Yes, Larry, so we're a little over time, but Mr. McCullough is always open, like say he's on LinkedIn. If y'all need his email, feel free to reach out to me. But thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.